All right, now we're recording. Welcome everyone to San Antonio Fire Department Training Field here in person or virtually. Our gracious hosts, Mike Mullen and Sarah Flores, have done a lot of work to prep for this. They'll also be hosting the accreditation class Tuesday through Thursday here in person. This will be the only class thus far scheduled in Texas. And today we do our annual meeting since we weren't able to meet in person in Orlando. And we'll start with Debbie with CPSE to give some reports from the parent organization.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you, whether it be virtually or I'm jealous of the people that are in the room, but have an extra cupcake for me. It's great that you're able to have a meeting in person. This is the first consortium group that's held an in-person meeting this year. So congratulations on that. And hopefully as things start to loosen up a little bit more, we'll start having some more in-person consortium meetings. And as Leonard said, thank you to San Antonio for hosting the new quality improvement for the fire and emergency services workshop. This is a complete update which will reflect the CFAI 10th edition of the model. The class was piloted in Gwinnett County a couple of weeks ago, and the instructor cadre has been working very hard to make some updates to the curriculum. So we have finally fine-tuned it and hope all of the folks in the room are going to be able to attend the class, but you will be getting the new updated curriculum. And as Leonard said, right now, San Antonio is the only agency in Texas that's hosting a workshop this year. So if anybody else would like to host a workshop, say third or fourth quarter, just send me a note, or even first quarter of 2022, send me a note and we'll get you a hosting agreement. So just to go over, some of the what's going on at CPSE, operational changes. The headquarters staff still is working remotely right now, 2 days a week. We're in the office 3 days working remote. Starting July 6th, we'll work 3 days in the office. But since COVID hit, we had all the infrastructure in place to be able to work remotely. So the only difference that you'll notice is if you call the office, and you'll need to leave a voicemail if it's a day that we're not in the office. But otherwise, most of us have our mobile numbers in our email signature block. So that really is the best number to go ahead and reach all of us. But if you have to leave a voicemail at the work number, we'll be sure to go ahead and give you a call back. As you all know, with the hearings, the commission hearings through 2021, the commission made the decision that there will be no in-person hearings, that all of the hearings will be conducted virtually. They're going to meet later in the year to determine how they're going to move forward with 2022. All of the virtual hearings, though, are being streamed on YouTube. And in fact, tomorrow, beginning at noon Eastern, will be another round of hearings. So you can go to our website, and I'll go ahead and I'll put the link in the chat so everybody will have the link. But you can go to our website a half an hour before the start time of the hearings to be able to grab that YouTube link. Certainly encourage you to watch, see what's going on. CFAI's had a lot of new commissioners join in the past year. So as you know, different commissioners always ask different questions and pick different areas that they're more concerned with. So it's a great training opportunity for you. It's a great training opportunity for everyone else in your department. So, I would encourage you to at least join in, watch some of it. If you can't make tomorrow's hearings, and especially for those that are attending the workshop, the next set of hearings will be June 14th. And again, they'll begin at noon Eastern. As I said, the commission will make the determination how they're going to approach 2022 later in the year. With site visits, they are continuing as full in-person, some hybrid, a couple of full virtual site visits, which really has been a tremendous amount of work for the team that's had to conduct full virtual, particularly for the team leader. Those agencies that feel they need to have a complete virtual site visits just really need to communicate with Carl Risto and justify it. And then he'll be meeting with the CFAI chair and vice chair to determine whether virtual is possible. But I would say that 70% of the site visits right now are hybrid, where instead of 4 folks going out on a site visit, 2 or 3 are going out, and 1 or 2 are doing their work and their interviews and writing their reports in a virtual environment. On the CPC side, they continue to provide that 90-day grace period beyond your expiration date. And that's kind of been something that the CPC's always done, not just because of COVID, but just as a reminder that is still in place. Our technical advisor folks, they've started going back out in the field, doing for the strategic planning, they're doing the internal stakeholders in person, still doing a remote virtual for the external stakeholders, but we're ramping that back up as well. Things going on in the university. I did speak a little bit about the new quality improvement for fire and emergency services workshop. So we're excited that that curriculum's been updated, and it does follow the new book. And as most of you know, we took the FESM and the CRA SOC and combined it into one book. So you only have to worry about carrying around one book instead of 2. I would encourage everybody to, if you haven't visited the university, to visit the resource library. We're continuing to add new handouts and videos, anything from to do with, introduction to accreditation, introduction to credentialing, writing the 4-part answer. We've got some on strategic planning. So some really good resource documents that you could go ahead and download, and they are available to the public at no cost. One of the things that we're going to be looking to add to the university is hopefully next month, we're going to be adding a strategic planning academy. That's going to take some of the community-driven strategic plan work that the technical advisor program has been doing, only it'll put it into a virtual environment and on-demand download where an individual can have a login for 60 days. It's 9 components that you would go through, and it's 9 hours of asynchronous instruction, along with 4 hours of university instructor hours, workshop hours. So you'll be able to ask your questions and get some assistance on that. So a lot of downloadable tools on the strategic plan. And the exciting thing is in 3rd quarter, we're going to do a similar academy for the community risk assessment standard of cover. That's set to launch Q3 of 2021. 10 hours of asynchronous instruction on developing your CRA SOC, again, with some downloadable tools to develop the elements of the document. 6 hours of virtual technical assistance, and a customizable online survey to gather your community feedback. As we start launching that, look for some information to come out, probably through our email blast that we do periodically on our learning opportunities. And for those agencies that are already in the process, whether it be registered, applicant, or accredited, we'll go ahead and send a separate email to all of those agencies so they're aware of it as well. Project updates, 10th edition, you know that it was approved, and it takes effect March of 2022. And if you haven't already received the strike through underline of all the changes from the 9th to the 10th, it is posted on the accreditation managers SharePoint site, the peer assessors SharePoint site, or communicate with Carl Risto and he'll make sure that he can get a copy to you for that. And then we just held our inaugural live virtual excellence conference in March. And that did go fairly well, but we're already looking to the 2022 Excellence Conference. The Education Planning Committee has already started work on it. And thanks to Leonard, who is chairing that committee for us. And a survey was just completed. So the committee will be looking at the feedback from the survey of what attendees want to see in the way of education sessions and topics and delivery format. So look for some changes for next year. The Excellence Conference is going to be March 22nd to the 25th in Orlando, Florida at the Caribe. So we're excited to go back to an in-person conference. Call for presentations will go out July timeframe, and registration will open probably sometime in October. CPSE just completed developing a new strategic plan. It's a 2-year plan, and even though it's just a 2-year plan, it's pretty aggressive. We've identified 6 areas of focus: multi-step path to accreditation, robust digital strategy, meaningful brand awareness, greater and broader engagement and collaboration, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a center of innovation. For the team, each one of the areas of focus has a board member co-champion, along with a staff co-champion. And then we're bringing in our CPSE community that includes commissioners, peer assessors, peer reviewers, consortium coordinators, agencies, officers. So we're certainly going to be taking that team approach to get a lot of input to help us complete this plan. During Q2, we're really beginning to do all of the scanning via, surveys, conversations, research, before Q3 when we start shifting to planning, and then Q4 start in implementation. This plan needs to be completed really fourth quarter of 2022, and then we'll start identifying if we're going to carry any of it over into 2023. But in end of 2022, we'll be creating another new strategic plan. So look for updates on that as we go through. I know I'm the staff champion for the robust digital strategy, and our IT vendor is currently conducting an assessment. So they're starting to build a lot of good information, listening to our community and what the community needs and what the community wants in the way of some changes that would make your life easier within the CPSE community. So certainly anytime you have any feedback, feel free to just go ahead and shoot me an email on it, and I'll make sure that our IT folks are aware of it. They'll finish their assessment so the board can approve it in September of 2021. And then just some other upcoming dates. CPC, their next meeting is June 1st, and you can always find what the meeting dates are on the website. They do meet every other month, the first Tuesday of every other month. And then for CFAI, the next ACR due date is July 15th for those agencies that were accredited in August. And again, just as far as upcoming workshops, San Antonio is hosting starting tomorrow, and filled the class. So that was great to see all that interest. But if somebody else in another area of Texas is interested in hosting, just let me know. And with that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Debbie, on the strategic plan that's coming forth from CPSE, was there any discussion of an ISO CPSE kind of crosswalk, or if you're an ISO 1 and you're still accredited, you keep it, stuff like that, or any relationship between them?
Other than the credit that's already been given, there's not been any further movement between CPSE and ISO.
And did TAPS do y'all's plan? Just kidding.
Actually, no. We did actually we did actually hire an outside consulting firm. TAP did our last plan, but it was really more having outsiders come in. It's a little bit easier sometimes for outsiders to tell the board that you're wrong. That was really why we went with an outsider. It just makes it a little bit easier dealing with leadership, I think.
I'll ask Brian how he feels about that.
All right, well, I'm going to hang out for a little while. So if you think of any questions, I'll probably hang out till your break. So if you think of any other questions, just send me a note in the chat. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Debbie. Next up, we have Matt doing a presentation on, what's the official title this time around? And he's still muted.
Having trouble talking through that beard.
I was talking, you just couldn't see it moving. Sorry. So the title is, what is your fire department's worth? Sorry, I'm just juggling several different screens. So let me get this started. I tried to show it, that all of a sudden Zoom disappeared. So there we go. Alrighty. So so thanks for the invitation, Leonard, and everyone from San Antonio. It's good to see some familiar faces and some faces and some names I'm not familiar with. So I'm Matt Hines-Aldrich. I'll actually switch screens here. So for those, go ahead. Oh, okay. So for those that haven't met me, I'm Matt Hines-Aldrich. I have been in the accreditation world in one form or another for a few years now. I used to work for Atlanta Fire Rescue in their assessment and planning section, and so since leaving Atlanta Fire, I went on to and worked at NFPA for a number of years, and then was recently joined a group called American Association of Insurance Services. So I'll share a little bit more about that here in a second. But so one of the some of the key themes that kind of underlie my background is I'm quite interested in doing a lot of work around community risk reduction and trying to kind of facilitate the adoption of CRR, but also looking at the question of kind of performance management. And so there's a lot of it ends up talking about data, and so kind of inadvertently become the data guy. So one of the questions you may have, and if you saw my presentation with Zach Wells at the Excellence Conference, there will be a lot of kind of crossover with this. So my apologies if you've already seen some of this, but I'm not sure who all has seen it. And but AIS is an insurance advisory organization. We've been around since 1936, so it's actually been around for quite a while. Although I would venture to say pretty much nobody in the room has ever heard of it, at least before I joined there. And so we're a not-for-profit organization. We're also kind of a membership organization, and I'll explain what some of these things mean here in a second. But we're an advisory organization and a rating bureau and statistical reporter, which all are insurance terms, but I'll explain that here in a second. So there's 700 insurance carriers that across the country that are members, and we've had a public fire protection rating methodology since the 70s, I believe it was. But again, pretty much nobody's ever heard of our legacy one. And so recent years, we've been redeveloping from kind of the ground up, and so that new approach is called FLAME, so Fire Loss and Mitigation Evaluation Score. And so when I joined AIS, one of the things that often came up was people were kind of like, well, what is an advisory organization? And obviously most people have heard of ISO. In fact, there's 2 national insurance advisory organizations in the country. ISO is one and AIS is the other. And so, but when I started trying to figure out how to explain it to people, I started realizing we're actually quite similar to the role that NFPA plays in the industry. And so, again, there's a lot of text here, but really the takeaway is just like NFPA or ICC for that matter develops codes and standards that then are adopted by local communities, which make it much easier for local communities to develop standards, because if they did it on their own, it would take quite a lot of expertise and skill sets they may not have. We do the same thing for insurance companies. So basically we develop kind of model policies and model forms that they would then adopt, and each one of those have been approved by the various states departments of insurance. And so those can be basically they can basically take them off the shelf. They can make minor tweaks and modifications, but it vastly speeds their time to market. We also do a fair bit of research on various topics, again, kind of like that NFPA does, and fire protection is one of those areas. And then we also share a lot of insurance companies share data with us, and then we submit it on their behalf to the various states that have things that are called data calls. Which again, are very exciting insurance concepts that you don't really need to worry about too much, but it's but basically that's how we get a lot of the data that we do our evaluations and analyses of. And the key thing here is in the insurance world, because again, I'm going to assume most of you, like I was, didn't really understand quite how the insurance world works. And in the fire world, we have the AHJ that kind of is the person behind the curtain that makes the whole world, like this whole process work. In the insurance world, the insurance commissioner or the Department of Insurance is that person behind the curtain who forces the insurance carriers to abide by certain policies and get all their forms adopted and everything. So again, I'm sure most of you are not interested that much in insurance, but I just want to kind of provide that little bit of context. So, but the topic I wanted to talk about today is this question about the evolving understanding of what is how much does fire protection cost, and what's the value of fire protection. And so we're probably, most of us are familiar with the 4 little data points that is filled out in pretty much every NFIRS report in terms of the value of the building, the pre-incident value of the building, the pre-fire incident value of both the property and then the contents, then what was the amount of the loss to both the property and the contents. So I'm going to guess that most of you that have ever filled out an NFIRS report have filled that out. I'm going to also guess that pretty much none of you have ever had training on how to do so, or how to make the assessments, or how to guesstimate what the actual costs are. However, that information then goes into, because it's in your NFIRS reports, then it goes up to your state fire marshal's office, who then uses that. And then of course it goes to the USFA, who then uses it, and goes to NFPA and all the other people who then take that information and go. So basically we take a whole lot of people without a whole lot of training, who are at best are just guessing. And then we use that to determine what the value of the fire service is in the country. And so there's some challenges with that. But again, there's this idea that it is a required part of the NFIRS form. And so, and frankly, it's better than nothing. So really we're trying to, there's a lot of work going on right now, trying to figure out, can we get beyond this? Can we, for one, do a better job of estimating what is like coming up with a better estimate for what those fire losses are? And so if you see me present anytime recently, you've probably seen this, we share this table on the left. This actually comes from the Vermont State Fire Marshal, as you can see, and the most recent one that they have on their website currently, at least as of like 2 weeks ago when I looked, was the 2019 version. And so this is the only state I've seen that actually publishes data in this format, which I think is pretty fantastic. And frankly, it'd be great if a lot of states did that, because I think it would really highlight the disparity between what fire departments estimate in terms of the dollar loss for fires, and then what insurance companies report as paying out for all those same fires. And so this, again, this is not data that I've collated. This was done by the Vermont State Fire Marshal. And so the two boxes that you see, like 2016 is really dramatic, the difference between the fire departments. So again, if it's not clear, the left-hand side of the table, that was entered by fire departments. And that's basically the rolled up number from all the NFIRS reports that were submitted for that year. And then on the right-hand side, again, if it's not clear, that was the information reported by the insurance companies that operate in the state of Vermont and what they reported having paid out for those same fires. And so if you look at 2016, it's a pretty dramatic difference between what fire departments are guessing the fire loss was and what the insurance companies report paying out. So I mean, that 2016 there is dramatically the widest divergence, but it really highlights that we're in some ways doing ourselves a real disservice by our underestimation of what fire loss is. The other thing that probably is less obvious, because we tend to look at just the big numbers, is actually the difference in N. And again, if you slept through some of your stats classes like I did, the N is basically the number of observations. And so under the left-hand side, that's basically the number of fires reported. So for 2016, that refers to basically 3,200 fires. And then on the right-hand side, we have for 2016, the $57 million only reflects 706 of those fires. And so if we actually were to, there's still quite a big gap. So there's still another like 200 or 2,500 or so fires that are unaccounted for that. And so potentially the actual estimate, the insurance estimates could be a lot higher. So again, it really brings into this question of like, are we, when we look at fire loss from the fire department standpoint, from NFIRS reports, we're really only capturing a snapshot of it. Now, you'll notice that I put an apple and then an apple pie, because one of the things I really want to highlight is this: we're not really truly comparing apples to apples. And so, contacts bother me. And so we have the on the right-hand side with the insurance information, they're also factoring in a whole lot of other information into that dollar loss. For example, business interruption or disruption to the functioning of the organization or the company or whatever it might be. There's also displacement costs. That's so if you have an insurance policy and then they put you up at a hotel for a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a couple of months, so they end up having to rent you an apartment while your house is being rebuilt. That is part of the fire loss. And so again, that's not stuff that we would typically consider or evaluate when we look at the fire department estimate of loss, but that is technically an economic loss based on the fire. And so the other thing is that many policies have sometimes we're known as full replacement values, which is kind of like when they talk about like car insurance or auto insurance, like what's the value of the home today? Not necessarily what the tax assessor's value of the home was, but in order to rebuild it today, what would it cost? And so again, there's really just, this is probably the most striking illustration I've seen to date of really this difference between those two. And it really begs the question, well, why doesn't just the insurance company, why don't they just tell us? And we'll come back to this, but it's not always that clear cut. And in fact, I'm guessing a whole lot of you, like I did, have tried to reach out to the insurance companies before I got to working for the insurance industry, and tried to get some of that information, and probably ran into a few brick walls. So we'll come back to this here in a little bit, but we'll kind of explain where some of those brick walls come from. So the thing I wanted to share, I thought I had an updated view of this, but the property loss estimation tool, if you're not familiar with it, is a Excel sheet that has all the calculations based in it. In fact, I actually have an updated version of it. I thought I had to update a screenshot, but we redeveloped it recently where it actually gives you a range of values. But anyways, if anyone's interested in this, it's an Excel spreadsheet. It's free. Happy to share it with anybody. And you can, you basically, all you have to put in is the state, the zip code, and then the information in the gray boxes. So like what type of occupancy it was, what type of construction class, and then the square footage and some estimates about how many, like what percentage of the contents or structure was damaged. And it will basically do a lookup based on the ICC building valuation data, which is updated every, I think it's every 6 months. And then it'll just basically give you a range, or give you either a value, or again, the newest one has a range. And so, and you could basically just use this to plug it into your NFIRS report. So it is a better estimate. Again, if you're historically your firefighters are just eyeballing it and just guesstimating, this at least hopefully has some has a little bit of substance behind it. Also, there's the ability, again, this can all be customized, as you can see, like put your logo here. You can customize this. You can also, there's a place where you can actually upload the website. If your local tax assessor, whether it be the county or city or whatever it might be in your community, if you have a GIS map or some lookup tool, you can actually just put the link there, so then they can just click on that. Because again, that would be another good source. So feel free to reach out to me. I can share my contact information later if you're interested in that. I'll send you the most up-to-date version. And the other thing is there is a couple other tools that are out there. These are for-profit companies. They're SaaS-based tools. So there's a new company called Loss Evaluator who's trying to make a start, and they have a whole training program, and you can get a whole certificate. But they can, and this was actually started by a company that's in like the property restoration business. And so they're the companies that you tend to call, and if your home had the fire and needed to be like, you know, new kitchen or something, that's kind of that industry. So they decided that they kind of came up with a way to create estimates using their own kind of industry estimates as kind of validation. There's also another company called E2Value. This is predominantly used by insurance adjusters, but I was talking to them recently, and it turns out that they did have a couple of fire departments in California that tried their tool a couple of years ago. So both cases, again, they're for-profit companies, but they're tools that you could adopt and consider that might help you come up with better estimates. So the other thing I wanted to kind of get at was ultimately the question, particularly when we look at these tools that try to estimate fire losses. In many cases, you take the value of the property and then you say, well, it's 20, like, so in this case, you say it's 25% damaged. This has always bothered me when I was first found this property loss estimation tool and some subsequent evaluations based on that, because I was kind of stuck with this idea. It's like, well, does a 25% damaged house mean that the value was you take 25% of the total value of the home, and that's what the loss is? I was like, well, it seems like actually based on smoke damage and water damage and a lot of other damage that occurs, it'd actually be much higher than that. And so for a long time, I've been kind of asking this question is like there's got to be a curve here. And so the question then and again, I just put this in for illustration purposes. So maybe it's not a 25% damaged building equals 25% of the value. Maybe it's something closer to 50 or 60%. Maybe it's even closer to 70 or 80%. I wasn't quite sure. And then there was this other question is like, well, do we ever get to a point where actually the value of the loss is actually greater than the value of the property? And so this is something that's been bothering me for a while. And even since I got to started with this in the insurance industry, I kind of struggled with this because I wasn't able to find any data to really support this. And so again, these curves are just for illustration purposes, but I've been trying to figure out, do we ever get to a point where actually the value of the property actually is higher? And so then, again, coming full circle, one of the other presentations that I attended at the Excellence Conference this year was Chief Mike Despain did a presentation, and he actually had been doing some research with some guy that has an app or tool for evaluating fire loss, and he was doing some analyses, and this is actually data that he shared with me, and he let me share this with others. But he had actually been able to demonstrate that the kind of I mean, it's pretty amazing numbers that that the idea is that somewhere around 40% damage of the building is basically totaled. And then it gets to a point where actually the cost, the cost is actually like at a 50% damaged building, actually, his research was suggesting was actually somewhere in the neighborhood of 150% of the value of the property in terms of the total cost. And again, the key part here, and this is the weird part, is it actually, once you have more damage, it actually goes down, which is hard to believe. But really what he was getting at, and part of what was motivating his research and getting him to ask this question, was this observation that a lot of us have had of you make a really great stop on a fire and you save 50% of the building, and then a week later there's a bulldozer out front and they're or excavator or whatever, and they're tearing down the building. You're like, well, we just made a great save on this building. We saved half of it, and then the outcome ends up being the same. And so this is, I'm guessing, again, based on my own experience, having what I did mention, I was a volunteer firefighter years ago until I realized that that riding backwards was not my skill set. And so, but I had kind of seen this, that it was, and always kind of bothered me. It's like, well, is there actually a point where it's kind of like law of diminishing returns, where it actually, we can make a really good stop, but it doesn't actually change anything. So again, this is Mike Despain's work, Chief Despain's work. So I encourage you to touch base with him, because again, I don't know that he's actually had any sort of like full external validation of this, but it's a really interesting proposal. So, but one of the things I wanted to kind of sort of transition to, and I know we're kind of getting a little short on time, was this idea that we really need to start thinking about, so just basically coming up with a better mousetrap in terms of doing a better job of putting a value on your NFIRS report, that only gets us so far. Because again, as we talked about, there's a whole lot of other stuff that we don't factor into our fire department estimates of loss that actually the rest of the insurance industry or economic industry would look at. And so, but this is also kind of where you start to get into, start to challenge some of the traditional ways of looking at fire loss. And so when Zach Wells and I were doing our presentation, one of the things we started realizing very quickly is we really need to highlight that it gets to a point where you really need to assess the economic appetite, as we refer to it, of your audience, meaning that when we start looking at trying to how do you estimate better fire loss for your NFIRS report, it's pretty standard. We can again fine tune that mousetrap, but quickly then you start getting into bigger economic analyses and economic impact studies, and that's where it starts to really get more complex and more challenging, if you will. And so what we started realizing, and this is one of, there's a guy from who's a division chief from Montreal Fire Department who's done a bunch of work in this area, and he really cautioned us when we were doing some of our preparations for this for the Excellence Conference. He really cautioned us and said, well, you really got to be careful. You don't want to, he's like, whatever you do, he's like, we've learned, don't talk about the value of statistical life. And what's otherwise known as VSL. This is a concept that comes from the economics literature. In fact, they use this for like studying the economic impact of road safety and other types of safety. And because what he said is every time they present VSL, half the audience like kind of basically gasp, like how dare you put a dollar value on a life? And more importantly, they say, well, is like the homeless person over here, is their value of their life less than this like CEO person over here? And it's really not the way that the VSL is used, but this is an established economics concept. But I'm going to guess that half of you probably like kind of gave it a kind of quizzical look, like so you're going to put a dollar value on a person's life, and then or like the willingness to pay is another great term. So again, it just really highlights, because as we get into this, once we get out of we get away from the NFIRS reports, it gets it gets kind of more onto the expert end of this, and it really gets kind of quite complex economic analyses. So again, just actually to stick one more slide, I meant to put this one before, about this is like basically taking your NFIRS data, and this is something that Zach Wells, who's a battalion chief in Kern County, had shared that their department does. And so, and in fact, actually just this morning, he was sharing with me that they did their 2020 data, and he said actually like that their save rate or their save number was substantially higher, but their save rate was actually substantially lower. And he said it was all thrown off because of one incident where they had a F-16, that a military F-16 went down in their district. So the cost of the F-16 and the ensuing fire dramatically threw off all their data. I was like, well, I think you can pretty safely exclude that as an outlier. But again, so this is a very simple illustration, but it was really, and it's all basically Excel based, and you can just, all the color coding is automated through their, through the Excel conditional formatting. So it's a pretty interesting, easy way to illustrate some of like where you're getting, which years you had greater saves in your save rate. So again, if you want to chat about any of this, I'm happy to talk about it towards the end. But this is where I meant to say in terms of where we start to get into more complex analyses. So this is some research that was done by Eric Sailors, who's a BC out in Sacramento City. And he wrote this as part of his thesis from the Naval Postgraduate School. And he termed it quantifying the negative, which is really this idea of how do we put a dollar figure. If we do a really good job of stopping and preventing fires, whether it be preventing a fire from occurring at all, or stopping it at the building of origin, or the unit of origin, or the room of origin, how do we quantify the value that we saved in terms of the economic dollar value that, that didn't occur? Because again, if we're going to demonstrate the value of our fire departments, we're going to need to come up with a better and also a more empirically based and statistically rigorous methodology for this. And so he developed a pretty complex model. And again, this you can review his thesis, but he came up with a whole concept and some statistical analyses around kind of quantifying what all the buildings on all four sides, or if it's like, say, if it's a one unit of a strip mall, how do you quantify the value based on like if it had been kind of contagious from one building or kind of propagated from one unit to another, what would have been the value there? So again, it's a pretty complex concept, but it's really getting at this whole point of how do we start quantifying, get beyond the NFIRS value and start to put a dollar figure on what value we bring to the community. And this is where we start getting to really big numbers when we start to ask some of these questions. And so there's been a number of studies. A lot of us have heard about the Phoenix, the Phoenix fire study that was back in 2014. Most of us probably haven't heard about the ones that came after that. So Orange County, Florida did an analysis. Very similar. And then Montreal and Sherbrooke, and then Lévis, I think it was, another town in Montreal. And these were like the latter two or three, however we want to look at them, were all done by a guy named David Waterhouse. He's the one I mentioned as the division chief up in Montreal Fire Department. And so so he actually, this summary table was put together by David and the economists that he works with. And so we start getting into really big numbers, like, where was it? So the return of investment. So if you look at the Sherbrooke one in green, a return on investment of 2,100%. It's just monumental numbers. And then you also, like, you start seeing, like, in terms of the total economic impact of like $831 million. And so we start actually seeing, massive numbers. And so it really, this is where, for one, like, this is why we mentioned about the economic appetite. So like, I say this, that when you share these big numbers, be prepared for people like you're either going to get the kind of gasp from the audience, like, what do you mean you have a 2,100% return on investment? Like they're going to start questioning just the validity of it because it just seems so absurdly high. But then also you're going to get some people who just can't really comprehend what that means. Then on the other hand, you're going to get people, particularly if you have an economist in the audience, who are going to want to get into and really perhaps even debate about what are some of the values and numbers that you put in there. And again, a lot of this, where you're getting some of these really substantial numbers, is based on kind of like some of the concepts that come from economics in terms of primary industries and tertiary industries and all the other different types of that. For example, that's part of the reason Sherbrooke was so high, was it had a lot of primary industries, which are like extractive or mines and big factories, that they have a lot more economic impact than, say, for example, an Applebee's, which is more of a secondary industry, and so, or potentially even a tertiary industry. So, anyways, the idea here is that when we can actually start to demonstrate the true economic impact of our fire departments, we can do that. But again, it's not just it's not an easy kind of like thing. You just kind of like throw that number out there. It's like that each, for every, for example, again, looking at Sherbrooke again, the total economic impact per intervention. So we're not saving, like, or people are going to start questioning when you say, well, you know, every single time we respond to a fire, we're saving $43 million. Again, it's a different, that's of course going to cause some pretty substantial debates. However, it really starts to get us to think about what are the downstream effects. So that if you have a fire in a factory, and then the employees are out of work for a period of time, potentially they're out of work permanently. And so then they potentially, so then you're not having payroll taxes, then you're not having people maybe lose their home, and then they're not paying property taxes. They may have to move out of the community because they can't find a job. Then they're, and so it really just gets into these cascading effects of some of these fires. And so that's where you really get into, again, it's pretty complex. And so, and there are tools out there. So for example, in a lot of these programs, they use what's called a REMI model. And REMI models are, they're used every time you talk about like moving a stadium or justifying public funding for like a sports stadium. They often use REMI models. And so these are for-profit tools, and they're quite expensive. So it's, so not only should you use caution when kind of going down, like opening this kind of Pandora's box, but also just be mindful that that this is not this is kind of high stakes economic world, and so then of course a lot of the stuff that costs a lot. So, but again, there's really this idea I just want to leave you with is that it is a little bit of a Pandora's box that I would be cautious about some of this economic impact studies because there is a whole lot of debate about them. But this is why I would encourage you, and why a lot of these successful programs have partnered with economists from local universities. And so I would definitely encourage you to do that. And one thing I would say is actually there's a small kind of ad hoc group that's really started quite recently. Again, it's been kind of coordinated by this guy from Montreal, but there's now probably about 30 people. We just got connected with some people in Australia. There's people from Harvard, from the Netherlands, from England, a couple from Canada. There's a whole bunch of people who we all kind of share an interest in these economic analyses of fire departments. And so hopefully that something will be coming out of this, because all these 30 some odd people used to think they were kind of working on this topic alone. And then we started realizing there's actually a small group, but there's a kind of a community that started. So one of the last couple of things I wanted to talk about, and again, I'll wrap up here shortly, is this idea that comes back to this whole idea, where does insurance fit in this whole thing? And one of the challenges we have, and frankly, it would be great if the insurance companies would just kind of just tell us what the value is. And like, if they would just kind of like, let us know, and then we put it in our reports, and we'd be kind of, we submit our NFIRS report and be be great. The challenge we have is on the left-hand side, you have like this photo, you have you can imagine like a company officer sitting or a battalion chief sitting in front of the house saying, I don't know, what should I guess that the loss is? And so the fire department's just looking at that house and trying to say, well, it looks like it's probably 80% damage, maybe somewhere 75. We could kind of debate about what percentage damage it is. And it looks like it had some, it looks like it got into the house beside it. So you have some exposures, and it looks like it at least to burn the roof off the house next to it. So you have some damage there. And so you have the fire department trying to guesstimate what the loss is. And so, and ideally, the fire department wants to guesstimate what the loss is within the first, 24 hours. And that way they can close their report and submit their NFIRS report and be done with it. However, the insurance company is probably going to take somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 years to truly figure out what the value of that loss is. And there's part of that is because, I mean, the insurance company might send an adjuster out there and they'll put some ballpark numbers on it. But but really to know the true cost of the fire, and this is part of the reason why insurance companies are kind of loath to give you guesstimates, because they're going to basically take 3 to 5 or more years, to figure out like what the actual loss was. And this, in the insurance industry, in the actuarial world, this is referred to as a loss development triangle. And so and part of what this is like for them to really figure out what the losses were, they basically figure them out at these breaks. And so like, well, how much was that loss at 24 months? What I mean by that is when a fire occurs, there's this kind of sequence here. And so initially they're going to have to put somebody up in a hotel. So there's that cost initially, but then and so part of it is that if you've ever experienced a loss, hopefully you haven't, you realize that the insurance company doesn't pay out everything at once. They pay out at various increments or for various costs. So initially they're going to pay out for a hotel, and then they're going to pay out for the investigation. And again, if there's any subrogation going in there, then they're going to have to pay out for the demolition of whatever part of the building's left, and then the carting off of the demolition debris. Then they're going to have to pay for reconstruction, and then the building, and then eventually at some point you'll get your house back. If it's fixable, you get your house fixed, or if it's a total loss, then potentially you get a new house built. But again, it's going to take quite a while for that to figure out. And so insurance companies, when the fire department is on the front yard trying to figure out, like, the house is still smoldering and the fire department is trying to guess what the loss is, the insurance company said, well, I'll know in 5 years what the loss was. And so somewhere in between there that's where kind of the problem comes in, because insurance companies they're not ones to provide guesses. Their insurance companies don't tend to operate in guesstimates. And so they would say honestly and genuinely, they don't know what the loss is, because they won't know for several years. And so the adjuster would give you a guesstimate. But and the other thing I've heard, and I've heard a lot of people say this, is that they went up to the local fill in the blank insurance agency that has like a storefront somewhere in their community. And I've literally heard of someone talk about parking their fire apparatus in front of at the strip mall and going into like State Farm agent or the whatever, Liberty Mutual agent or whoever the insurance company is, and saying, hey, we just had a fire in your property. Can you tell us what the value is? And I forget where it was that somebody told me that they did that. And they said that the person looked back at him with this quizzical look like, no. And it wasn't simply because the insurance company is trying to hide information, that the agent, like the storefront, they don't have anything to do with the loss part of it. In many cases, it's not part of the same system. It's not, they can't look it up. And so it's not necessarily that they're hiding any information. They just don't have it. And the other thing I've learned in the insurance industry is they very much they're very protective of their data. And so they give very few people access to their data. And even if they do have it, and there's also like everything, even if you got access to their data, there's a lot of questions about how accurate or how correct some of it would be anyways. But the last kind of thing is, as I mentioned, AIS has been developing a new approach called Flames. And by doing so, we went back to square one because we started realizing it's like, all right, how did we get to where we are with what we measure and what we think is most important in terms of evaluating fire risk? And so we went and did some historical analyses and found as far back as 1916 that was called Standard Schedule for Grading Cities, and you can read the rest of it. But and this is this is actually a photograph of the original, and so this came from so the NBFU was actually one of the it actually went out of business in the 60s, I believe it was, and then it became the AIA, the American Insurance Association, and then later another spinoff became ISO. And so you can kind of see a very clear lineage that we've been measuring basically how far a property is from fire departments and fire stations for a very long time. And so we started to question that maybe it's time to rethink this, basically. And we started going back started to reimagine the whole, basically went back to square one and started reevaluating. We also started challenging some of the traditional conceptions. So we started getting away from measuring and giving grades to fire departments. So we started actually evaluating fire loss at the zip code level. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And some fire departments kind of, when we first heard about it, they kind of pushed back and said, well, but I only cover half that zip code. How can I be held responsible for it? It's like, well, you're not being held responsible for it, but it does definitely encourage you to work better with your neighbors, though, doesn't it? So, so we're starting to actually get come up with a new model for this and try to look at fire loss at a higher level. And really, we've been focusing on predicting claim severity, which is meaning predicting and estimating the amount of fire loss that would occur in each zip code. And so we think it's actually a better model. The other reason for using zip code is actually the size of zip codes vary based on the population density. So in built up urban communities, you have very small zip codes. In very rural communities, you have very large zip codes. And so, the size of the zip code actually varies kind of based on population. So for insurance companies, it gives them a lot more a nuanced understanding of the differences within a city, for example. But then in rural areas that might be covered by several different fire departments, more or less, actually, you're going to have pretty similar outcomes, regardless of what side of one jurisdiction boundary or another. So, and really, again, this idea of fire loss is recognizing that having a fire department on every corner doesn't actually change the fact whether fires occur or not. What it can do is potentially reduce the severity of fires. And so, so we are looking at that, and hopefully out of this will come potentially some reimagining of kind of focus on what can we do to reduce fire claim severity in terms of reducing loss and reducing damage. So maybe salvage blankets will become the new hot commodity. But again, there's a lot more about this. I don't want to turn this into a sales pitch. And so, but I'm happy to chat with anyone about this anymore, or if you want, there's some information. There's a whole white paper on AISonline.com/flames if you want to read about that. So anyways, that's all I have today, but feel free to, please do reach out if you want that property loss estimation tool or any of the other things we talked about, or I talked about here today, let me know. So thanks, Leonard, for the opportunity to present today.
All right, any questions from the group? Feel free to chime in if you're online, or if you're in the room, I'll just relay the question through the mic. I did get a question via text. It asked about grape jelly. I don't know why. Ask him if he has any grape jelly.
No comment.
I was going to say, I should remember the story, but I don't. Anyways. Any other questions?
Matt, so the property loss estimation tool, you can just send that to me, right?
Yep, absolutely. I'll send that right now.
And you can, if you don't mind, posting it on the chat as well, in case I don't have everyone's email.
Okay. So I don't. Can I post files on there? I don't have it as a
Yes,
link.
sir.
Okay.
And now we're going into our break until 2:15. Everyone get back here and we'll do our Texas exclusive stuff for 10 to 15 minutes before we have San Antonio do the presentation and Esri. Recording. All right, so first off, this is our official meeting for the year for Texas because we didn't meet over the Excellence Conference. But speaking of Excellence Conference, we're starting the development process of the next year's agenda and format. So I somehow ended up as chair in the organizing the conference. So we're fielding like ideas on what you guys want to cover, as well as some of the format, like some of the sessions we might have a keynote, we might have classroom lecture presentations, hands-on learning, moderated panel discussions, and roundtable. Hold on, looks like I've got a chat.
How about appraisal?
All right. So is there any ideas on what y'all want to see at the next Excellence Conference, other than going to a spring training game?
Appraisals.
Appraisals? All right, let me mark that down. And we do have some preliminary results on the survey already. Let me just go back here. So the top 3 topics coming out so far are, well, accreditation, of course, risk assessment, strategic planning, 10th edition, data, credentialing, assessments, program appraisals, strategic planning, succession planning, tools, data analysis. So that's the preliminary results so far. In terms of like thinking, I'm also thinking like each session might have a different type of format. So here's a preview of that here. So keynote speak, talk, seems like classroom lectures apparently still very popular. Hands-on learning, if we can somehow do that, a moderate panel discussion or a roundtable seminar. A roundtable seminar would be like what Metro Fire Planners would be like, where it'd be a roundtable discussion and the participants will be providing the answers. Moderated panel, you get a handful of folks and a moderator will be asking the questions to the panelists, probably with the questions known ahead of time. Poster presentations, like someone's going to present their poster like a little more of a walkthrough style. I think you all know what a classroom lecture is. Keynotes. We're still, if you all have any good ideas on keynote speakers, send them my way, or any specific topics. There's Stuart Mars, who's also on this call, is also part of that committee. And I became chair by default somehow, again, for this. So just an update of the Excellence Conference. It will be in person, but there might be an online option as well. We have not decided on that quite yet. Everything's still in early stages of development. There will be a call for presentations once we have a settled theme, as well as how many slots we want to fill. In terms of Texas Consortium, no one has sent me an email being interested in being chair, vice chair, or secretary. So I guess I have to nominate myself again for chair. Is there any opposition? Please. Next year, I'm going to make sure to be opposition.
You're
vice chair. I know, Brian. Vice Chair, Randy Parr, even though he's retired, he's still interested in helping out and serving. He just retired from Tomball, send him a congratulations. And Roland DeGraw from South Lake will be the secretary unless there's opposition. All right, by unanimous consent, we'll be there for a 4th term. And since I'll probably cap myself to 4 years, so I'll be drafting someone if no one is willing within the next year. So is anyone here, any insights on their peer visits or that they have been subject of or been on, considering that please keep confidentiality intact in these discussions here? Anyone going anywhere?
Have they assigned those yet, Leonard?
Not for this summer round, but they have sent out emails asking who's interested. And if you're a peer assessor, make sure you do your continuing education. You need to do 4 hours each year or you're booted off the list and you have to retake the peer assessor training again. So Houston, we just finished our site visit a couple of weeks ago. Our hearing is tomorrow afternoon. If you guys want to take a peek on how we do during the hearing, you can log on to the link on the CPSE website that's going to be available. Let me actually pull up who is due up real quick. I believe y'all can still see my screen. Actually, so the next hearings are going to be tomorrow, then May 26th, June 14th, July 19th, August 24th. You can see a sample of the hearings here. Let's see if I have the email pulled up. Give me one quick second. Come on. Just give me one more second as I find that email.
And y'all's will still be virtual, right?
Yes.
Have they any word on when they're going to take in-persons again?
Debbie was saying that they have yet to make that decision because right now they've been staggering around. There's around more than 75 agencies due up this year due to all the backlog from last year being pushed in. So they're trying to make sure everyone's covered in a reasonable fashion. Okay, share screen. So the hearings tomorrow start at 11 a.m. Central Time with Fox Crossing Fire Department, Delaware, Spartanburg, and Peoria. And then there's a 15-minute break, then Houston and Vista Fire. So there's a total of 6 departments tomorrow. I believe there's going to be probably 10 in the May 26th date. So if you guys want to take a peek, prep, take notes, figure out, because there's new commissioners, so there might be new themes, but a lot of questions do focus on the recommendations, as well as deployment model, making sure you have a safety officer on scene. There's always questions about health and safety as well. Any questions regarding what's coming up in Texas? And we'll probably have some type of Excel training August, September. Not sure what how to approach that yet, but I'll do a walkthrough on pretty much some response times or looking through some of the basic inference data.
Good luck tomorrow.
Thank y'all. And I still owe cupcakes and donuts to folks for everyone that has helped us out. All right, so anything else on a Texas level that we need to discuss? Any issues anyone facing? And I'll probably do a run through of what legislation has passed in the summer once the session ends. There's a good number of bills that do affect the fire service in Texas. Some of the outcomes are yet to be determined. All right, so Chief Norris, take it away. You are now due up.
Woohoo! Hello, everybody. And so Leonard asked us to present something since everything was coming to San Antonio. And so one of the new innovations that we're dabbling with is a clinical dispatcher program. So let me try to share my screen here, figure out if I'm doing it correctly or not, which is not hard to believe if I don't do it correctly. Post disabled, man. Leonard, do you want to let me share my screen?
You should have access now. You're a
There we
co-host.
go. There we go. Let's try that one. Sorry about this. Didn't know worky real well. For some reason, I can't share. So let's see if that did it. Sorry, Leonard, let me play with this. And if you have anything else we can look at the time, I'll work on this real quick.
It's you or nothing until Esri's logging on, and they're not logging on until later.
Well, thanks for the pressure.
We'll give everyone a quick 2-minute break. Resume recording.
Sorry about that, everybody. So you can still hear me, right, Leonard?
Yes.
So the San Antonio Fire Department is starting a new program, and we've been working on this for quite a bit now in order to try to get our dispatchers more apart and ingrained into our response. And so just a few things about this new program. It's a clinical dispatcher program. It is not consistent with what is coming forward in ET3, if y'all have been studying that model and are moving forward with that. However, it is something that has actually helped us a lot. And so to tell you a little bit about San Antonio Fire Department, we are a fire-based EMS system and an all hazards fire department. We have about a little over 1,766 employees at this point. 123 of those are civilian, with 54 fire stations, 54 engines, 21 ladder trucks, 2 hazmat teams, 2 technical rescue teams, airport crash, and then 43 ambulances, 35 of which are full-time, and we have 8 peak period units, one of those being a 24 unit. So quite a large fire department, an extensive fire department. We cover about 500 square miles in total. And so looking at efficiencies in any system that we can move forward with is very important to us. One of the things that is great about Texas, as y'all well know, in the EMS field is we are a delegated practice state, which basically means if your medical director says you can do it, he's willing to train you to do it, and you're practicing under his license, then you're allowed to do it. This picture takes into consideration some of the training, or shows some of the training that we do with our whole blood program. We actually carry whole blood on many of our EMS units and all of our medical officer units in order to resuscitate trauma patients in the field, which was one of the last innovations that we had come up with, this one being the next round for us. So delegated practice is very important for us and what we're able to do as far as the EMS system here in San Antonio. The San Antonio Fire Department Communications Division, just at a glance, we are essentially a secondary public safety answering point. Our PD does the initial 911 call answering, and it's transferred to the fire department dispatchers. So they're all housed in the same building, which is the one that you see just above the verbiage here. It's staffed by 53 uniformed personnel who are all certified paramedics. Almost every single one of them has experience in our EMS system out in the field, and they do work on 4 24-hour shifts. And so as you'll see, we move forward, they essentially work an EMS schedule, and so they're very in tune with our response. And the PSAP processes over about 160,000 calls annually. So looking at all this, and we were playing with different things, and then COVID-19 arrived. And so San Antonio was either fortunate or unfortunate, whichever way you want to classify that, and to where we were one of the locations that the federal government decided it would be a great idea to fly people in from China and house them in our city. Essentially, that started off as a federal program that they didn't need any help with until they realized that people actually do get sick and have to come off base. And then they realized that they cannot come back on base. And so we were dealing with the COVID-19 situation pretty much, besides our friends over in Sacramento and some other places like Kansas City, we were pretty much dealing with it before anybody else. That led to a traveler program where they were flying travelers, or travelers were returning from China. So we had kind of a jump start on the whole COVID-19 thing as we were going along. During that, we developed a relationship with our public health agency, which is Metro Health, to where we would start doing actual house visits with them, and also assisting them with any type quarantine. So through our MIH program, we were able to assist any travelers returning from China while they were going through their quarantine to get them anything that they needed. Through that, we saw, just like everybody else, PPE start to become limited. I know for a fact we've ordered about 1 million masks here, and we've yet to receive one of them, of the ones that we ordered, much less other stuff coming out of the National Strategic Stockpile. And we saw a surge in local and interdepartmental cases this last summer, just like pretty much everybody else in Texas. And I can tell you, we were no exception to the massive surge that took place. However, we did do about the same as most of the bigger departments in Texas. And what our goal was to try to limit exposure of personnel. And so looking at that, a lot of people started scouting, they started doing different things. We wanted something that was even more invasive to limit the exposure of our personnel. So we got some smart people together. The people in this is Dr. Miramontes is on the first picture that you see there. He's our medical director for the San Antonio Fire Department. Extremely smart man, extremely innovative and forward thinking. Dr. CJ Winkler is the deputy medical director for the city of San Antonio. The next picture there is Chief Mike Stringfellow. He is our EMS chief in San Antonio. And then we have Chief Bradley Poole, who is the chief of communications, and Lieutenant Rex Pantoja, who is one of our communications supervisors, who they got together and they started really putting this plan together. I was kind of the mule that tried to get them everything they needed to make things move forward. And what they started looking at is different applications that we could use to try to utilize the paramedics that we had sitting at dispatch. And what they came up with was a program called Good Sam. It's an application that was developed and it's widely used in the United Kingdom. What it does is allows dispatchers to activate the camera on the caller's cell phone with their permission. So when they do that, essentially you never hang up with them. They send you a link. You don't have to download any application. You don't have to do anything else. You just allow them to do it. And what it activates their their camera on their phone while they're still talking to the patient. So we can see the patient. And what this has is some artificial intelligence inside of it. And you'll see a picture here in just a second, where if you put the patient's face in a box, it'll actually tell you their pulse. And so there's different things that this can be used, but it offers one-way or two-way video services for us to try to eliminate some exposure to our folks. And next, I'll tell you how we're planning on using it. So out of that came our clinical dispatcher program. And we started off with using this for low acuity calls or sick person calls without any distress. So essentially, we would get calls from COVID patients. Hey, I'm COVID positive. I need to go to the hospital. And we would end up having to tell them, no, just because you got COVID doesn't mean you have to go to the hospital. It just means that, you have COVID. So are you sick? So we developed medical protocols. We also developed a system to where we could give taxi vouchers from our dispatch center without even showing up on scene. This program started taking calls on October 19th of 2020. And we ended up paying for it using CARES funding. And so we were able to staff some dispatchers on overtime to do that, with the goal of the program to be a more efficient use of our resources to limit the exposure. So their goal was not to send any San Antonio Fire Department units to low priority calls. And so you can see off to the left there, there's a picture where you can see it's reading his pulse rate inside of there. And that's actually one of our dispatchers who you'll hear on a video here in just a few minutes, doing an excellent job with one of our patients. And holy cow, the system worked. And so these numbers came up. We've been tracking the analytics on this a great deal. And actually it's showing, we started off at about 60% success rate. So 60% of the calls that would go over to our clinical dispatcher would have no San Antonio Fire Department resources sent. We're up to 71% as I calculated it out this morning, which is a great system and benefit for us when you start to calculate what kind of savings that is to the system. So we run our ambulances run on average about 12 calls a day. So you can see as we get up daily saving 14 to 20 calls, we're actually taking the impact that an EMS unit would have off the system. And so one of the videos I want to show you today is actually what the system was, this part of the system was actually put in place for. So if you'll cooperate here, let's see.
The San Antonio Fire Department has recently begun utilizing the Good Sam app that uses technology to better serve our community. The app allows paramedic dispatchers to provide the public the appropriate amount of care while reducing resources sent to the scene, conserving valuable personal protective equipment, reducing hospital overcrowding, and keeping emergency responders available for critical incidents. The Public Safety Answering Point, or PSAP, receives a call for a medical emergency. The caller is greeted by a San Antonio Fire Department paramedic dispatcher, and the existing call taking process begins. The dispatcher will verify phone number and address before starting to work through a medical protocol written by the Office of the Medical Director. This protocol and the experience of the paramedics assist in ensuring no critical patient is ever missed. Callers complaining of severe medical problems will have resources sent to their location while the call taker is still on the phone. Those callers that have milder complaints will be asked further questions to provide appropriate care. Once a caller is identified to have a lower priority incident, that caller is transferred to our new clinical dispatcher. The clinical dispatcher will continue to assist the caller and allow the initial call taker to become available to answer other emergency calls. The clinical dispatcher will take time to verify no critical signs or symptoms were missed during the initial call taking. If a critical situation does not exist, the clinical dispatcher will send a text message to the caller using the Good Sam app. The caller will be asked to click on a link and allow permissions for audio and video. This text automatically turns on the caller's camera and will allow the clinical dispatcher to see the caller. This provides valuable information to the clinical dispatcher, such as their skin color, effort of breathing, ability to follow commands, and provides a view of the injury. The application also utilizes the phone's AI capabilities and will give the caller's pulse rate. With all of this information, the clinical dispatcher can assist the caller in making the best decision for their situation. This could include sending no resources if at-home care is appropriate and available, sending a taxi voucher for transport to the hospital or clinic, or sending a fire resource to further evaluate the caller. The next phases of the program bring endless possibilities for patient care and situational awareness. The Good Sam app allows our dispatchers to bring in a consultant, such as our medical director, for guidance in difficult situations and providing first-class customer service and unmatched patient care. The Good Sam app can be used for situational awareness as well. The caller's video can be streamed to responding units so they may see the scene before ever arriving. This will allow responding incident commanders to better prepare for situations and even provide an opportunity to be ahead of the curve before they arrive on scene. The San Antonio Fire Department expects to continue to lead the way with this technology. Nowhere in the country is this system being utilized as it is here in the city of San Antonio.
So with that, we've had great success with the program as it started off during COVID. And so we were able to not send on those sick person calls that I was talking about, and also what we call fire only responses, which is those EMS calls, those alpha or omega level calls that you may be familiar with, that we only send a fire truck. We don't send an ambulance on them. So in your infected hair follicle or something like that, we're not going to send you an ambulance. We're going to send you somebody to just evaluate. So it's been very successful so far in our city. And then we had something come through Texas called Winter Storm Uri. And so I'm sure a lot of people on the phone call are familiar with that. I think I saw a couple of people from up north were still on the phone call. Like I believe my friend Don Dixon's still on there. Stop laughing at us, Don, because yes, it's not supposed to snow in Texas, but every now and then it does. However, with this storm, it was the worst winter storm in South Texas in over 100 years. We had 5 days of single digit temperatures, along with in San Antonio, I know we had over 6 inches of snow, which turned to ice at night, which was kind of crazy. However, what it caused in San Antonio was about half the city was out without power for up to 5 days. That's over, it was over 500,000 residents that were 800,000 residents that were without power for several days, some of them up to 5 days. And then 3/4 of the city had no water pressure. And so just to give you an idea, in hydrants in downtown San Antonio, we were getting about 6 PSI of water pressure out. Just to activate a sprinkler head takes 7 PSI of water. And so with all of the high rises and all of the different buildings that we have in the downtown area, we had some situations. Even hospitals were not able to fill their boilers. So we would have to go do that with water tenders. In that, we also saw a call volume rise of 130%, which is more than double our normal call volume. And we had dangerous travel conditions. We do not have the winter weather capabilities that they may even have in Dallas, per se, because you're used to getting snow every now and then. San Antonio is not. And so it made it for very interesting. So what we did see is we started to see a great increase in falls because people were walking outside to see the pretty snow and slipping on the ice. And so with a doubling in call volume, we had to do something also with the dangerous travel conditions. So here comes clinical dispatch to the rescue. During the winter storm, we added up to 7 more clinical dispatchers. And then Dr. Miramontes, or one of the EMS fellows that we have in the San Antonio EMS system, also attended or showed up to dispatch, and they began processing calls. What you can see on here is we also staff people up at our alternative dispatch center, but with over 10,000 calls coming in that 7-day period, the clinical dispatch system and the medical director diverted almost 4,000 of those calls. That totally saved our EMS system from just collapsing. We couldn't get people to different places. And so clinical dispatch really helped when we did not want to send or need to send resources, and people could find help in other ways, or we could help them over the phone through a telemedicine type system. So what's coming next? And so actually last Monday, we started our pre-arrival care and situational awareness program, to where we're taking this to the next step. We want to start bringing our dispatchers to become an integral part of our response system. And so we're going to take advantage of the paramedics that we have in our dispatch center. And so we extended the program to all of our dispatchers. So every position that is in dispatch right now has access to Good Sam. And so we are starting to use it now for every full arrest call, every stroke call, structure fires where somebody is still on scene, and then any active shooter calls. And so one that would come to mind is we had a person shooting off a balcony in an apartment complex. We could actually take that video, see it in dispatch, and get that down to our response units. So actually sending the video out is kind of difficult for us right now. However, we have a fix for it and we're working on that. However, just having that situational awareness, those pre-arrival instructions to where you can actually see the patient and see what's going on has been mind-blowing. And actually one of the things that we're thinking about terming this and moving forward is, look, seeing is believing. How many calls have you gotten for a fall at a golf course that's a full arrest, or all of those different stories that you can think of? And so I do have a video that shows some of the stuff that we are seeing with this program. I will warn everybody, if you're not used to seeing some pretty troubling video, this may be troubling, but if you don't want to see it, it's about 3 minutes long, so we'll take care of that. But here you go.
San Antonio Fire Department, this is fire and EMS. I can help you.
Yes, my husband fell down and he can't be responding to me.
Is he breathing?
Is he breathing? Nothing.
Okay. What I need you to do is I need you to get by him. I'm going to send you a link, and I want you to try to point it at him. I'm going to help walk you through this. Okay. All right. Are you ready? Yes.
Hello?
Yes, sir. We're on the way over there. I'm going to send you a link, and I want you to, is this your cell phone? Is it a working cell phone?
It's a cell phone. It's a working cell phone.
Okay, so I'm going to send you a link, and I want to see what you see, and we're going to start some CPR, okay? Put him on his back for me. Place him on his back. Okay. Okay, what I want you to do, listen to me. No, I want you to kneel beside him right now. Listen to me. Get sideways. You need to hurry up right there, and the other hand on top of that. Give somebody else the phone. Move your hand up a little bit. Point it at him. I need to see him. All right, listen to me. Now push straight down, hard and fast. Push straight down. You have to push harder. Hard, right in the center. Down, up, down, up, down, up. Push hard. Push. Okay?
I'm calling because I think my mom had a stroke, and so I just want someone to come check on her.
She ever had a stroke before?
No.
Okay, and what's she doing?
Right now we have her in a wheelchair, but her left side of her face is, when she's talking, it's like droopy, I guess, and she can't move her left arm or her leg. Yes.
Are you on a smartphone? Do you mind if we do a stroke test?
Yeah, I'm on a smartphone.
Okay. And I just want to let you know, we do have units on the way while we do this test, okay?
Okay.
Okay, they come through there, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you ask her to smile real big?
Mom, can you smile? Smile.
Okay, that left side's a little low. And can you ask her to raise both arms?
Can you raise both arms? You can't raise the left
Can't raise
one.
the left one at all? Okay, we're going to do is have you take your way. We can just gather her belongings. I want to go pretty quick.
The grill at Leon Springs is on fire, burning through the roof as well.
Okay. I'm going to send you this video request to your phone. If you could just hit OK to those permissions, and then that way we can take a look at the scene while you're there. Not too close, so I don't want you to get injured or anything like that, but just so we can see what the scene looks like.
Chimneys collapsed now.
Okay, chimney did collapse. Okay. Yes, sir.
I believe it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it looks like they got a pretty good fire going on there.
So with that, you'll see some of the different possibilities that we can utilize this information for. And once we're able to send that video and information to our responding units, we feel it's going to be a great game changer for us, especially in the speeding up of care that not only our full arrest patients are getting, calling stroke alerts to the hospital prior to arrival of any EMS unit, or being able to utilize resources. So in that structure fire, They had already started setting up a second alarm assignment for us. We do have a structure fire working group that they were able to send prior to anybody else arriving on that scene. And so we're very excited about that program to see where it goes from here for that. So what's next? Good Sam actually started off as kind of a pulse point, if you would understand what that is. So Pulse Point is a program that started off that would advise people who are trained in CPR of full arrests that are happening near them. That's how Pulse Point works, and that's also how Good Sam started off. One of the things that we're going to be starting off is an AED and CPR program with that, along with our situational awareness. So we'll be able to tell people where AEDs are when they're on 911 with us. And the mapping on Good Sam will do that for us to tell them where they're at. We're also looking at a mental health response program through our MIH program. One of the great things about Good Sam, and they're utilizing this in London right now, as a matter of fact, is they've contracted with a drone that if they get a report of a working fire or a mass casualty incident, they can actually put a Good Sam equipped camera onto a drone, start forwarding back information, but the pulse reading will also work off of the drone footage. So they can fly over an MCI and tell you how many are dead, how many have a pulse, what their pulse is. It's kind of freaky and scary at the same time that it's really ultra cool. And so what else are we going to use this for is whatever else the smart people come up with. And so we see the possibilities as endless to this. We see this as an innovation in the service and how we utilize our dispatch center. And so something we're pretty proud of, and we're going to keep moving forward with this. But thank you, Leonard, for letting us present this. I apologize if I stumbled a lot, but it's my first time doing this particular presentation. And I'm better in person, so it's all good. But thanks. And I'll give you back the Millennium Falcon here, Leonard.
Oh, you could, Brian could hear me with that question. Any questions from the group? Any questions from anybody here?
Can we get a copy of that presentation?
Yes. And who was that? Sorry.
That was Chief Kerwood.
Okay.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, up in Williamson County. I'm already, as it was going on, I'm already talking with our dispatchers.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll be more than happy to share with you, Chief Kerwood.
Brian, the other quick question on that was one of the things we had tried in Atlanta a while back was actually, or we kind of set it up, but then dispatch kind of got cold feet, was sending a kind of some sort of evaluation or survey link or something like that through our Everbridge like a week or two later, hopefully once things have calmed down and cooler heads have prevailed. But just basically using that same information, if we have their cell phone number, we can send them an SMS text message to. I'm just wondering if you guys have explored using that to send like a kind of like a net promoter score, like just basically one question, like how would you would you recommend, or like it's not like it wouldn't really work with a true net promoter. Like, would you recommend the San Antonio Fire Department for your next fire? Right. I'd rather not have another fire.
You don't have much of a choice.
but some like basically very simple question like that to evaluate and basically start quantifying the feedback from people who engage with either this program or even frankly any other calls, gather some feedback from them of how effective or they're responsive or empathetic, right, or whatever term you want to look there.
Well, what we've experienced in doing surveys like that in the past is that they always tend to come out the same time their EMS bill does. And so that was directly reflected in it really didn't matter what kind of service you gave. It was that they were mad because they were getting a bill because their insurance didn't pay. And so we're very careful about that. We look at getting customer feedback in other ways. City does several surveys, a year that come back, and part of that is rating the service from the different departments that we get. One thing that we have done is the Good Sam app actually does have a kind of like a text feature to where you can text several questions, and depending on how they reply to those questions, it'll alert you. So what we started using that for during COVID was for our firefighters who were sick with COVID. Every day we would have somebody that's checking in with them. We would send them the survey. If they came back that they weren't feeling right or the answers weren't the way that we wanted it, we could instantly video conference with them so we could see how they're breathing. We provided them with a pulse oximeter. We could see what it was. We could put a doctor on the line with them. Okay, walk 10 steps or walk back. We've used that application to its fullest during COVID, but we haven't done anything survey wise with it.
Brian, you said that it was funded by CARES money, right?
Yes.
Yes.
The
And
first
what
year
was the
was.
startup cost? So how much is it how long did it implement? How much did it cost? And was it a reimbursement or did they provide the money up front?
So it was COVID, so we had to enter into a contract. So it's a contract service depending on how much video usage you want to use and how many cases there are. The other piece of it was the funding of the dispatchers that actually sit in the dispatch center to do that. And so that was one of the things that we were able to cover with CARES money. But now it's been such a success, we're actually looking to move forward. Actually, our chief is making a presentation tomorrow to try to continue the program and add actual positions with the successes that we've had with it.
And how long did it take to get off the ground?
We worked with this for about 3 months for sure. Trying to find the right balance, getting the medical protocols done, getting the computer center set up down at our dispatch. We did run into some snafus with the different cell phone carriers. And so for some reason, T-Mobile was, there's ways to describe that, but not really without just using the word cluster. But I think we've gotten a lot of that worked out. One of the other things that was that's difficult is learning how to communicate with the senior citizens on the cell phone. And so a lot of them are familiar with how to accept texts or how to accept permissions. But I think they've gotten a real good handle on that communication piece. And then a big piece for us was the ability to send the taxi vouchers from our dispatch center. So in San Antonio, we have a program that, you need to go see a doctor, but you don't necessarily need an ambulance. Well, to get that ambulance back in service, we'll give you a voucher that you can take a taxi. Now, instead of having to have units on scene to do that, we actually do that from our dispatch center, which is that's been a great benefit for us.
Anyone else with questions?
Well, thank you all for the opportunity to look at this. I look forward to seeing everybody in person soon. But I'm going to walk back next door and see the people that I can see today.
All right. So actually, we're going to do an introduction real quick. Jerry Noliner is going to be the instructor for the class for the rest of the week. He's in the room in person now. Any words of wisdom before you go through what I had to go through back in 2011?
Don't beat up the instructor.
All right, his instructions are don't beat up the instructor, but he's here and we'll be teaching the class the rest of the week.
It will be the second presentation of the new program.
It will be the second ever presentation of the program. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. We're going to wrap up early. And Esri is going to be providing a presentation of GIS in the fire service when we come back at 3:10. Record mode. So everything you say is now on the record. Brian, are you saying anything? All right, go ahead, Mike. We have Mike Cox and Kelly Alman with Esri. They're going to be discussing GIS in the fire service. Thank you again for being able to join us today.
Absolutely. And Leonard, I'm going to concentrate a lot on accreditation and some risk reduction capabilities that most of the folks on the call probably already have access to. And, certainly there'll be some operational capabilities, I think, related to those. So if anybody has any questions about operations, we can certainly take care of that as well. Trying to think here. Oh, sorry about that. Let me do it this way. There we go. Okay, great. So again, thanks for having us. I am Mike Cox. I am your Director of Fire and EMS Solutions for Esri. Come to you after 27 years with Henrico County Fire Department, which is Richmond, Virginia area, right in the central part of the state. There, I actually retired as the Deputy Chief of Community Risk Reduction, which was responsible for accreditation and budget and facilities, all the things that, you know, nobody in the fire department wants to do. But, you know, had a lot of exposure to using GIS and geospatial data for specifically for accreditation. We were first accredited in '98. And before I left 3 years ago, we just gotten through our fifth cycle of accreditation. And Kelly, you want to say hi? Kelly's with us, the smart one on the call. So really, if you have any questions, they need to go to Kelly. But Kelly, thanks for attending.
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Kelly Allman. I work on Esri's public safety team. So my role is to work with the fire agencies in Texas, across the state, so local and state level, to implement GIS technology to support their mission.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. So, you know, the fire service is dealing with complex issues day to day, right? Emerging threats. And there's not a great solution related to just funding and hiring firefighters and building fire stations to these emerging threats and the needs for these solutions. So the first step obviously is to understand how our localities are being impacted. And that's a lot of the concept of accreditation is, you know, understanding what our community-wide risk assessment looks like and how we're delivering services to meet the actual identified risks and the populations that are at need. So we'll talk about some of those capabilities today, and we'll start kind of level setting how we use GIS and how we see GIS being used throughout the fire and EMS service. It's, you know, important to understand that, yeah, most everybody on the call, it appears, has access to GIS. So you already have either an enterprise account, which means you own everything that we're getting ready to talk about, everything from field mobile applications to dashboard views to story maps to the data that you need to get access to do some of these evaluations. You know, and the power of GIS is the ability to bring all these disparate data sets together into one view to provide support for data-driven decision-making and, you know, the ability to get good verified data either within your organization, to the public, to elected officials and the like. And you can bring together all kinds of data, much like you see in the view here. This is from a drill related to an improvised explosive device in a subway in the Bronx, New York. I would say great place to visit. Don't live there, but not even a great place to visit necessarily. But they were able to take all these disparate data sets, both from field mobile applications like our survey and collector applications or field maps, where they've actually got firefighters that are collecting data in real time, you know, turning them into human sensors. There, so you see a little bit of the initial view from UAS, the point cloud there generated by that. But the point is to be able to bring together these data sets to help you make decisions. And that's really what it's about, getting the right data to the right person at the right time. It allows us to collect data, measure it, put it into some kind of visualization, and then share it. And again, we talked about most people on the call already having the platform. 84% of local government is using Esri GIS in some way, shape, or form, which means that most of the localities that you're supporting and or getting mutual aid from probably have the same platform. Certainly all state agencies are using Esri GIS. So if you're dealing with issues where you're reporting to a state or something like that, or getting data back from the state during a significant event or some kind of initiative, then you know you already have access to those capabilities. And the sharing capability, it doesn't matter what kind of radio system they're using or what kind of device they're on, as long as you can send them a link, you can start providing these kind of products to them to help them either support you or make decisions, whatever the case may be. And again, data sets you can bring together, everything from visual data like satellite imagery to computer aided design or building information data, everything from floor plans to 3D models, LiDAR 3D modeling, certainly CAD, computer aided dispatch data, and RMS data, which we'll talk about a lot today during our risk assessment and performance measure discussion, and just about any kind of tabular or even unstructured data that we can, you know, provide that kind of location component to it and put it into these visual products, again, to help you tell your story and to make you or assist you in making decisions, your decision-making process. And we see GIS applied basically across all disciplines related to response. So whether we're talking about law enforcement, fire EMS, or emergency management, and even, you know, the use of the public utilities, public works kind of data in our response or in our analysis for response, planning for the response to certain issues is important as well. And the data we can provide or that you already have access to, is both local and curated through Esri. So our Living Atlas, which is a link we'll send to you after the call here or through Leonard, provides thousands and thousands of data sets, everything from real-time traffic to live radar and tropical storm system data sets to demographics that are incredibly powerful and drill down to really a granular level that allow you to start putting together these visual products to make the decisions based on what is occurring and where is that occurring and who is it occurring to. So we understand the impacts of an event or the risk related to an event, and we understand who that event is going to impact to better provide services to those in the most need or needing the most services. I talked about the solutions that are available to you. Another place I want you to take a look, and again, we'll send you the link after this, is our solutions page, solutions.arcgis.com. Some of the solutions we'll talk about for accreditation are there available to you, no additional cost, off the shelf. You can download them, some configuration, add your local data, and you can start using them today. So we're talking about minutes to deploy some of these solutions. And that can be things like performance monitoring. We'll have a dashboard for fire incidents, to doing home safety surveys, hydrant inspections, and on and on and on. So there's a section there for the fire service. There's a section there for emergency management. There's a section there for law enforcement. I certainly encourage you to look at the fire and EM sections. And then we put all this data together and present it in a couple of formats you've probably seen. Certainly the dashboard view, the dashboard application is one of the most common. If anybody's seen that Johns Hopkins dashboard tracking COVID for the last year and a half or so, that's the same exact technology we're discussing today. And then story maps, and I'll show you one or two of those that are really valid for briefings, like an operational brief or a budget presentation. And they're certainly great for communication with the public. So you're trying to do some kind of public information initiative, whether that's based around community risk reduction education or maybe transparency about your operations. All those things are easily completed with a story map deployment. Field applications we mentioned earlier as well. ArcGIS Field Maps is brand new. It's kind of the evolution of our collector app. So the collector app is going to be around for years. Don't worry about it if you're using it. It's not going anywhere. But the Field Maps application kind of builds on those capabilities and adds some additional capabilities. And we're seeing a lot of use in the inspection context. So whether we're talking about hydrant inspections, business inspections, home safety surveys, those kind of issues. Certainly our Survey 123, we're seeing that a lot in transitioning paper-based workflows like inspections. The FEMA USAR teams are using Survey 123 as part of their damage assessment and wide area search program. And INSAROG, the International Search and Rescue Organization, has also deployed it to all 50 of their heavy teams. So again, everything I just went through, most everyone on the call has access to this. So think about, as we go through these applications and these case studies, how you may also use it in other areas that you're responsible for fire service operations. We also have our disaster response program, and that is, again, a 24/7 service that is no additional charge to you. But if you have an approaching incident or a significant special event, as an example, I know we use some of these capabilities with San Antonio for the Final Four, which they did an incredible job at deploying a special event solution for that. But this is available. Again, you go to that website, there's a little blue button at the top right that says request assistance, and you click that button, and 24/7 you'll get a response. And it could be anything from additional software or some kind of configuration support, tech support, all the way up to and including, we'll put boots on the ground if it's a significant event and actually assign people to emergency operations centers or command posts and things like that. And you certainly have a strong support network, as Kelly was describing our presence in Texas, but we've got a significant office in San Antonio and several others throughout the state that if you did need that kind of support, we can get it to you relatively quickly. But pretty much everything we talk about, whether it's accreditation or community risk reduction or operations, everything starts with that risk assessment. And we're going to talk about community-wide risk assessment in that accreditation context. But anything we do really should start with that risk assessment. And GIS is a great way to deploy that risk assessment so it's easily understood. It has relevance to you and your organization and your community, and it's relatively easy to deploy. Again, this dashboard we're showing here is a fire incident dashboard. It's something that's in our solution set currently that you already have access to. You can download and start using today. Most of the time when we get this kind of data out of, say, an RMS or a CAD system, you get that database view on the left, which that gives us good information. We know we've had some fires and we've had some dollar loss. But to be able to put it out in that geospatial context really allows you to start to understand how your community is being impacted. So not only, what's happening, but we can start to see patterns through our community. We can start to filter by certain incident types or look at individual units or companies that are responding and start to understand what their performance was based on, time of day of the week, any of those issues. So it's very configurable. You can set up the filters as you deem necessary for your organization and start to do that kind of analysis on performance measures and understanding where your risk is. So the risk assessment for community-wide risk assessment brings together lots of disparate data. A lot of what I talked about in the Living Atlas can support you. That demographic data is very powerful to understand, at a block by block level, where's my at-risk population? Where do I have, low income, the very old, the very young? Where do I have English as a second language issues? Where do I have homes without vehicles, right? So if I'm establishing an evacuation zone, there's data there currently that allows you to say, okay, in this square mile, I've got 3,000 homes without vehicles. So that's, and I always put that in the context of an evacuation. Obviously, that would be important information to have if you're trying to move that many people. So a lot of resources available for you to start making these assessments and building your community-wide risk assessment. A couple great examples at the federal level. This is the National Risk Index, and it's a great display of what data is being published by FEMA and the USFA. That QR code there, if you pull your camera out, will take you right to that website. And again, we'll send this link to you as well. But I mean, these data sets, this app allows you to drill down to a county level and see the impact of natural hazards. I think it's 14 or 18 hazards they've assessed here down to a county level. But what's important here as well is you can go to the FEMA hub and start pulling this data into your products. So if you're doing a specific risk assessment for a city, town, or county, you can still grab this data from that FEMA GIS hub and bring it into your analysis as well. So that data is already there for you to start using. Another great example is the RAP tool, the resource analysis and planning tool from FEMA. That again goes through, I'm pretty sure it's just natural disasters, I'm not positive, but it also adds infrastructure. So I can see things like, how are my hospitals being impacted? How are my public schools being impacted by a particular risk? And allow you to start planning based on where's the highest risk to my infrastructure, and certainly, population and things like that can be built into it as well. Vision 2020 provides some great resources. They recently put out this discovery page. And again, you can go to strategicfire.org/discovery and take a look at that. That also drills down to the county level and allows you to start pulling fire and EMS data. Now, this is a couple. The inverse data here is a couple of years old, but it does provide a great example of how you can start collecting your data and putting it into one view, and to be able to have that analysis and make good decisions based on that true verified data. Some other capabilities within Esri GIS that I wanted you to be aware of. This is a demonstration of our community analyst, which really allows you to dig deep into that demographic data. And it's more than just census data. Esri curates data that we update regularly. So our population, both current population and projected population, are pretty impressive and don't require you basing your decisions on older census data, although I know we just updated the census, so you're good for a year or two there, I suppose. But it allows you to easily generate these kind of reports that you're seeing here, these visual cards that kind of can be embedded into reporting, whether it's a story map or some kind of a compliance report. That's what I was trying to get to, sorry. But even in these visuals, you can drill down into the individual issues and start to see additional data that can help you again make decisions. And these templates are built into the app. So the one you just saw was at-risk population. Here's another template built into it for coronavirus impact. And you decide, you can build your own templates as well and decide what data is important to you to be able to see what's going on within your locality. Another great solution we have available to you that's been used to do some pretty amazing work on the community risk assessment side and also the operational side is something called our target hazard analysis solution. Again, on our solutions page, it allows you to do an assessment of every single structure in your locality based on parcel layer data. So that means you can generate a risk score based on 6 criteria, and it's listed there: occupancy type, life safety, risk, fire flow, economic impact, and then building area and height. But what's incredible about it is you can do this for your entire locality without sending anybody out in the field to collect data. Doesn't require a walkthrough. You have all this data locally. Your parcel layer at the local level is incredible. It'll tell you things like what's the roof structure, what kind of heating systems in the building, a lot of other things, obviously. But you can adjust this. This is again a configurable app that you can adjust based on maybe what your locality's highest risk may be, and then have it do the evaluation based on what your needs are. And off the shelf, it's ready to go as well. So it'll do that analysis on those 6 criteria to again identify the highest risk structures, the highest risk to the occupant and the highest risk to the firefighters. And how do we see this data used? I mean, we see it used in a community risk reduction setting where I can identify the highest risk commercial structures in my locality and maybe focus resources for things like inspections based on risk. So maybe I'm not inspecting the 7-Eleven convenience store every year. Maybe I'm only doing that every 3rd year. But for that nursing home or school facility or hospital, I do want to inspect those every year. But that can be easily identified where you can start making work assignments based on risk, not just based on a list of addresses in your database. And we see that operationalized on the, particularly on the CAD side. Traditionally we dispatch to incidents based on the occupancy type. And so we're sending the same number of resources to, a 5,000 or 6,000 square foot McMansion that we're sending to a 850 square foot bungalow. And we may be sending the same number of resources to that 5,000 square foot convenience store that we're sending to a 35,000 square foot big box store. And if you think about the job task analysis, that really doesn't make much sense. So to be able to do this target hazard assessment and be able to send the appropriate amount of resources on the initial alarm is incredible. So, running this analysis, putting into the CAD and allowing the CAD to actually take over that decision-making point from the 911 officer. Once they determine location, once they verify the address, then that data is in the CAD to spit out that dispatch recipe. So, they don't have to ask, is it an apartment building or what kind of structure it is. They already know because it's built into the CAD based on this risk assessment. So as an example, our commercial assignment prior to us doing this back home, we always sent 4 engines and 2 trucks to every commercial. After this, we started dispatching by these hazard levels. And for our highest risk, we started sending, instead of that 4 and 2, we started sending 5 engines, 3 trucks, 3 ambulances, and 3 command officers, because based on the risk, and the risk includes the size of the building and the occupancy type, and based on that job task analysis, we were able to determine the number of firefighters needed on that initial alarm for a room and contents, right? Not for, fully involved or something like that. But it really did. It reduced the extension from beyond room of origin, and it reduced the number of extra alarms we called based on the fact that we were putting the right resources on the initial alarm. And then performance measures. So there's we talked about that dashboard view. There's also an application called Insights, which really allows you to dig deep into your data, and even without having knowledge of code or anything, kind of drag and drop functionality, you can actually start seeing what the performance is really doing within your community, and generate pretty good reports for compliance reporting or for submission of your accreditation requirements. And I'll show you a good example of that in just a moment. And including analysis like drive time analysis and understanding where our gaps in coverage are, and communicating with elected officials, budget cycles. So as an example, the map you're seeing now at the top right was for a bond referendum where a new fire station was being proposed. The bright red circle there in the middle of that heat map is where they were not meeting the 9-minute 9th percentile response time goal. But then you can see with a proposed station location in the middle of it and a 4-minute drive time analysis that new station would take care of that gap in service easily, just with a 4-minute drive time. And so when you present this to your elected officials or to your command staff, you can't argue with that data. That's verified data from our CAD system and from our drive time analysis that shows exactly how we can take care of that gap in service. And we're seeing a great deal of agencies move from paper-based workflows to digital workflows. So whether we're talking about, collecting data in the field for business inspections or home safety surveys, and I put this up there. This is the state of Missouri's fire inspection process. QR codes there for you if you want to take a look at their story. but they did a wonderful job to move away from paper-based to a survey 123 deployment to do their inspections, to do some of their enforcement capabilities. For an example, we spoke with them last week. They had shifted all of their blasting permit operations into this application, and they were able to increase the number of blasting permits they were approving. And within the first 4 months of the year, they generated, I think, $160,000 in revenue. Now, they were generating revenue previously, but the fact was, with a more efficient process, they were able to process those requests quicker and issue more permits based on the fact they had gone away from that paper workflow. And then community-wide risk assessments. Most of you probably know Chief Powers from Charlottesville, Virginia. This is a story map they generated to take care of, well, two issues. One was accreditation, the community-wide risk assessment. But the other was public information and dealing with their elected officials and their community as a whole. And what was unique here, I think, was, typically when we do that community-wide risk assessment, we talk about planning zones, we use first due areas. And I'll be honest with you, I still agree with that. I think we should be using first due areas for most of our assessments and workflow or performance measures. But obviously that's an option to you as the agency. So Charlottesville here chose to do neighborhoods, which I thought was unique and interesting. But they did that because, from a political perspective, from a public information perspective, from a budget process and elected official perspective, the average elected official probably doesn't understand what Engine 1's first due is, but they know exactly where the Belmont neighborhood is because that's in their electoral district. And then that data makes a difference to them. So still allow them to work through their accreditation process with planning zones. And they still address first due issues like, the management and responsibility of a first due area for a fire station or for a company. I just thought it was a great way to present this data, particularly outside the department, to help you with, but again, budgetary processes, public information, and the like. And then we have our hub application, which is being used more and more. Particularly, we saw great use during coronavirus, and it's essentially a website that somebody can come to and get data, and is used a lot for transparency from local governments, law enforcement, fire, and EMS. This is Montgomery, Alabama's public-facing hub, where you as a taxpayer could come in and see exactly what work they're doing, where they're doing the work, how they're spending your tax dollars, and just a great way to, again, collaborate or reach out to the citizen and the taxpayer to have them understand exactly what you're doing. But it's also very easy to manage. We saw a lot of localities using this inside the agencies or inside the departments to do things like track PPE, where individuals could log in and daily and say how much PPE they had or needed during the peak of the coronavirus response. So a lot of good ways you can deploy Hub to address your public information and internal data sharing issues or needs. And then engaging the public with two-way communication. We talk about public information, but there's also ways with our crowdsource reporting during an event that you can have them submit data to you. So we talk about doing community-wide initiatives during the accreditation process to get feedback from our citizenry, from our taxpayers. There's a great way to do it where if you want a virtual setting to be able to send out these survey 123, which can go out in a web form and get the data back, whatever the questions may be related to, what service delivery they understand you're doing, what service delivery they feel like they need, and that process for the public engagement during the accreditation process. And the ability to bring together data to really provide performance measures that we don't typically do. So this is a CPR report that pulls data from things like your parcel layer and some economic development data sources. And we talked about this on a previous call, and I just wanted to bring it up again today. It's hard to prove a negative, but we can prove that we had an impact even on individual responses if we can show not just dollar loss, dollar save, but what's the tax revenue we saved, right? What is the number of jobs that didn't leave my city or county because we had appropriate operations and the fire department did exactly what they were supposed to do, responding to that event. So I'll switch over really quick to a couple of, if I can find it, there we go, couple of actual applications. So this is that fire incident dashboard that we talked about that is on the solutions page. And it just provides some capability. Think about being a command officer, a battalion chief, or if you're trying to identify trends, for continuous improvement. It just allows a simple way to look at your incident set or incident data from an RMS and start to filter, for things you're worried about. So maybe I'm just worried about structure fire response. I can easily filter out all the other calls. You can see all my calculations at the bottom change based on the type of call that I pick. So maybe I go through and pick an EMS call, and you'll see some of those calculations change as well. And it's only filtering what's in the map, so it's only showing the units that respond to that. And you can also, pick individual units and understand what their performance is. Do things like call by day. 9th percentile is built into the dashboards now, as you can easily see. I should probably cut that off. Sorry. 9th percentile is built into the dashboards now, so you can easily see who's exceeding and who's succeeding related to your performance objectives. Here's an example of that target hazard analysis, the kind of one of the foundational data sets for your community-wide risk analysis. And this is where you take that parcel layer data and do an analysis of every single parcel within your city or county. And not only does it handle commercial or, commercial occupancies, but you can even, it even pulls in the parcel data from individual single family dwellings. So you can look at everything from, your largest commercial facility down to, individual single family dwelling, and understand what the risk may or may not be related to those 6 criteria, or however you configure it when you deploy it. Here's that neighborhood risk assessment, and I just pulled it up just so you could see. So many of you may have already seen this before, but they address all the issues related to an accreditation-based community-wide, that's CRA. So all those are in there, using GIS to fill in the areas that are most appropriate for the use of geography. So community profile and that kind of thing. And then a standards of cover analysis here from Travis County, which I thought was very effective in a way to present an SOC. So everything, from drive time analysis to projections of, being impacted by future population density. So again, a very effective way to do that. And I think, Kelly, this is public. We could probably share this link too, couldn't we? Do you know if it's public? But a great example.
Public.
Yeah, a great example of using GIS for that SOC. So from the community risk assessment through the standard of cover development, obviously it has an impact. I talked about that insights application, and here's one, again, incredibly powerful, digs very deep into your data. In large data sets, obviously you've probably got hundreds of thousands of calls over a number of years. But what I like about this is, it allows you not only to look at kind of a database view, but it provides a geography of everything you're looking at. So this is actual, San Diego CAD call or 911 calls, call volume by district, pretty effective way to look at unit hour utilization and how busy is busy. And I showed this one because I like the fact that most people, when we look at UHU or where our busiest units are and the like, we look at individual units. But when you think about budget discussions or discussions with elected officials or the public, they may not be worried as much about the individual unit. They may be more worried about, my area, my first due, my electoral district. And this allows you to do both. So you see here, utilization by unit. I can see my busiest unit is engine 17. But if I click on that, it will filter the rest of the data eventually. It'll filter the rest of the data to show exactly what engine 17 is doing. So here I can see all the districts engine 17 is running into. I can see their call type, longest drive times, where they're doing business on the map, time of day, day of the week. So again, a pretty effective way to look at your data. But again, not only to kind of look at individual units, but I can look at districts. So if I just want to look at 17's district, it again will filter this data to allow me to look at who's doing business in that district, what are the call types that are being run there. Again, time of day, day of the week. Obviously, I picked one district, so that's what shows up on the map. So again, a very effective way to go through the data, and you can push this out, in a view to, say, a fire station or battalion office where the firefighters can go through and do this filtering, but you can have it set so they can't actually change the analysis. So they can't, they could still break it, they're firefighters, but they couldn't, easily break it because they can't get in kind of the background to do that. But just to show you how easy some of these analysis are. So if I come up to the actual CAD data here, and I just want to do, let me see here, which one am I looking for? I just want to do time call cleared. Nope. I think first I have to find the right one. There you go, response data, I'm sorry. So if I just want to look at day of the week and hour of the day, I just pick those two components, I drag them over here, and I make a chart. And so it comes up probably as a bar chart at first. And this is taking a second because it's going through about 150,000 calls. So every time I click something, it's doing that kind of analysis. But I can do a heat chart here, and it tells me time of day, day of the week. So that's how easy that is to do that kind of analysis. So again, pretty powerful, digs deeply into that data and allows you to make, and generate reports too. I should also do that. I'm sorry. So again, you can share this data many ways. I can share it throughout the rest of my GIS organization as a layer, or I can generate reports. And so there's a way to actually set up the report page so you'll push to a PDF for some kind of compliance reporting. There's a very effective ways to be able to do that. Also, any analysis you do in this kind of application, it records it. So essentially, every time I click on building this analysis, I've got a record of that. So if I need to add additional data manually, it's very simple to just update the data here. Or if I want to share this model, with a neighbor, with another department, or have somebody else understand exactly what my analysis is, all the roadmap to that analysis is right there on this page and within the app itself. Here's the Vision 2020 down to a county level. I kind of put that out there to encourage you to go by, just to look at the kind of analysis that was performed and kind of what is the possible, because they're pulling things from a county level from a national data set. Talk about what are my top responses, what top action taken, and again, you'll likely dig deeper into that as you're dealing with your local data. But just as an example of what's available to you, talked about the WRAP tool available from FEMA. I won't go back into that too much. Here's a Missouri story on how they transformed from paper to digital, and we'll send this link to you as well, so you could review that if you wish. So again, anything you're doing on paper, press R3 copies, you can easily shift to survey 1, 2, 3 and collect that data in near real time to be able to do that, and then present that data in a view that's usable throughout your organization quickly and easily. National Risk Index, again, another great data set from FEMA that you can pull some layers from the FEMA hub into your products to help build that decision-making capability related to a risk assessment or understand what's impacting your community. So I'll stop here for any questions or comments or issues. Leonard, anything I missed or anything else you wanted to cover that maybe I didn't?
Nothing that I can think of off the top of my head, but just to reiterate, if your city has the enterprise license, you should already have access to all of this, so it's not really a sales pitch, really.
No. It's more of an awareness for most localities that you already have access to it, even if it's not in the fire department. But if your locality has an EA, that gives the fire department access to it. Kelly, you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think there's more than likely everybody today, right, has some form of access either through an enterprise agreement that you may not be aware of, or the licensing for Esri technology might sit within GIS or IT, and it's just sort of helping you connect to the right person there to get access. So we're happy to help facilitate that. If you've got questions around what your agency might have access to, Mike and I can certainly help answer those questions for you and get you connected with the right folks.
And there's a lot of good software there, but there's always the issue of building the capabilities to use it. So what type of support is there to get over that learning curve?
Sure. So we have lots of different enablement options depending on how supportive your GIS and IT staff are and how much time they can give to your department, if you've got those skills in-house. So it's really a range, right? So we've got training, whether instructor-led or self-paced courses. We've got consulting packages, right, to have a consultant come in and help stand up these applications for you. And we've got a whole host of partners that can come in and do that as well. So whatever your needs are, wherever you want to start, whatever support you need, I think we've got an option that will work for every department of every size.
All right. Any questions from the audience or online? Or is everyone just wants to go to happy hour right now?
Yeah, probably so. I completely understand that. They got a long week of class ahead of them. Certainly, if anybody has any questions, reach out to me and Kelly. We'll follow up with an email to Leonard, and Leonard, if you could forward that to everybody, and then they could just respond to our email address there as you forward it, that'd be great. And if you ever need any support, please feel free to reach out. You got a pretty strong network there in Texas. But just with your partner agencies that are doing a lot of this work already. So even if we just need to connect you with somebody, a peer agency of some sort, we can certainly try to do that as well.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, Leonard. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
And that's all we have on our agenda. So everyone is free to leave. And thank you again to San Antonio Fire Department. And we'll try to get something, a quick webinar, probably July, August, an hour webinars at some point. Topic to be determined. Thank you again for everyone that is attending. Let me know if there's any questions. And you should be starting to get your peer assignments if you are a peer team member. I just got assigned to Iowa again. So have a good week, y'all.
Thank you, Leonard. Thank you, San Antonio.